So I had other videos on the burner, and then 5 days ago, this is April 22nd that I'm filming this. 5 days ago, Kizzume made a video. It was a quick one. It said just a quick message about wokeness, where he got to declare that he's against wokeness. And so I asked him a question in the comment section, and he saw it. And that was, can you separate wokeness from being a synonym for feminism or critical race theory or DEI or affirmative action or PC culture or progressive ideology? Yeah. And thumbs up to it, but can you? Can you separate it? Because it seems like every election cycle nowadays there is a new buzzword, a new term that conservatives are fighting against, and they use fear-based tactics against these terms, like just scaring the bejesus out of all the Fox News viewers, right? All the people listening to AM radio. They just get scared of one thing, and then they get used to being scared about that one thing, so they give it a new name. So as far as the fear-based tactics against words, I would say the first one that I can remember being used would be the Red Menace. Communism. So, if you were in the 50s and 60s, the equivalent for wokeness would be the Red Menace. Anybody who would admit to having a leaning towards, helping each other out or using government for social justice, stuff like that. They were all painted as communists. Even Lucille Ball. But, yeah. That was not the beginning of it, I'm sure. It's just what I can remember. But then, in the 70s, there was the welfare queen, right? And this was something that especially was popularized by Ronald Reagan, who later became president. But he was targeting black women with that term. And he was targeting welfare programs with that term. 2 in 1, like 2 birds, 1 stone. And he would stoke racial resentment and opposition to social programs. And, it was just a horrible fear-based tactic, to say that, oh, look, this black welfare queen's buying lobster with your taxpayer dollars, But at the same time, on the other side of the country, you would see the term busing a lot, which just was about the desegregation of schools, and forced integration is what they would call it when they were using the term that people who use woke as a pejorative, that they would have used forced integration, not desegregation, like we say it now. And you can find that in their publications from the 70s. Forced integration. They're forcing us to mix with the... Yeah. So then in the 80s, it was, of course, political correctness, PC culture. And the target with that would be academia, media, liberal media, and inclusive language. And so... you also saw terms that you don't hear quite the same way now, like moral majority versus secular humanism. I remember growing up when secular, anything from the secular world was bad, secular bad. And I was like, once I actually learned what secular was, I'm like, actually, when everyone's welcome at the table, that's actually a good thing. But I grew up in evangelical communities. So, but that whole moral majority versus secular humanism thing. The target, it was gay people, feminists, atheists, and this was basically the rise of the Christian right and them aligning with the conservatives. And so they started their own little buzzwords in order to demonize people, because these fear-based tactics, they work to drum up support for the party, right? That's why woke exists in the connotation that it does on Fox News now, right? It was misappropriated from its original use in black culture, but that's what it means now. Then in the 90s, you had feminazi, right? So that was Rush Limbaugh all the way on AM radio, targeting feminists and feminism. And this was like really just painting a caricature of feminism as being like angry, man-hating radicals, and it downplayed gender equality a lot when he said it. He's just trying to discredit women's rights movements, and look where that's got us. Towards the late 90s, I started hearing Bill O'Reilly start talking about the culture wars, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't the one who invented it, but he said it the most. And the culture wars were against the arts and education, academia again, LGBTQ plus rights. So, yeah, culture wars, another buzz term that they would throw around, the war on Christmas, that's how old it is. Then in the 2000s, after 9/11 in 2001, we had everyone who was being liberal and showing sympathy towards anyone with brown skin. They were labeled a terrorist sympathizer or anti-American, just for saying, hey, maybe we don't need to, blow up as many brown people, and so this was targeting anti-war activists, Democrats, and Muslims. And this was all post 9/11 patriotism joining this conservative movement, right? And starting to use the same tactics, the fear-based tactics. You label the other side and you just keep on harping on them, and creating, a fear about those people. And it was just a fear about, like, criticizing the Iraq war meant that you were unpatriotic or that you were sympathetic to terrorists, and it was just bullshit, right? These were people that just didn't like seeing as many brown people blown up all over the world. But at the same time, you also hear anchor babies and illegals, right? Instead of immigrants, you'd hear illegals, which illegal could be anything illegal, right? But like when you hear that people are illegals, then you know that they're just, people who don't have the proper paperwork as immigrants, right? So calling immigrants illegals all the time, that was something from the 2000s after 9/11. And it's particularly targeting people from Latin America, right? It's not targeting Canada. It's not targeting people from Europe, right? It's targeting people from the southern border, right? And it just stirs up fear about, immigration and racial demographics. Oh, they're going to outbreed us. And national identity, Then I heard a lot about Sharia law about, I'm going to say 15 odd years ago. There was a lot of scares about, oh, they're trying to bring Sharia law to us. And that was just targeting Muslims and progressives. But Sharia law was a big buzz term for Fox News for a while. Then they would talk a lot about Black Lives Matter, and they would equate it with Marxism. And they say Black Lives Matter is Marxist. Now, they'd already demonized Marxism earlier when they were demonizing, communism and socialism, and all of those just lumped into the same basket of bad for us, right? A lot of the people using these terms don't even know why, can't even explain to you why they're bad. They just know they're bad because, the people that they trust on the radio and on the TV, But they would target black racial justice advocates by saying BLM and labeling them as a Marxist organization in order to delegitimize it. They portrayed protests as being riots and threats to urban, and suburban safety, right? And so it's strange that, when one side has protests, they get, called riots and stuff, and then, they had their own January 6th incident, and see how differently the different sides characterize these things, It's almost like both sides don't like each other's free speech, Socialism was a big buzzword because the Democratic Socialists of the Democratic Party started using it to label themselves. So socialism started to gain traction on right-wing media because they would attack Democratic Socialists, which is different than like socialism, and it's just a game of what term can we use that is similar to a term that they're using, where we can get it to, okay, so you admit that you're bad, right? That you're part of the bad group, right? But socialism was targeting Democrats, targeting healthcare reform and student debt forgiveness. It just became like a catch-all term for scaring voters about like any expanded government role or any help for people at all is socialism now. Like, bad. You give money to government and you get nothing, and that's the way it should be. And you should give a little bit less money to the government so that it can't give anything back to you. That's the way it should be, Now we have woke and the woke mob, which, of course, targets progressive movements, DEI efforts, culturally responsive things. There's critical race theory, which, like, it only got used for half an election cycle before they moved on to the next thing. But CRT is an attack on public education and anti-racism training. Groomer and the trans agenda. Those are some buzzwords too, right? And those got at least half a election cycle. DEI and ESG. Both. Those are targeting corporate diversity efforts and ethical investing, right? And it's, on the left, they're thinking about, let's have real meritocracy. Let's have a capitalism that's culturally responsible, and let's prioritize people over profits, and make corporations work for us. And that's like, no, we gotta smack that out of people because we like being exploited. So woke today is basically just saying PC culture, like I heard as a kid when I was playing my Atari and listening to You know, what was on the AM radio when my dad was fixing on his van. You know, they're all of these terms. I would call them moral panic buttons, right? The ideas behind them are like really distorted, and they're taken out of context, and the language is designed to unify a voter base by scaring the fuck out of them, right? And using like a perceived cultural or existential threat that a lot of times it's the same threat, it's just relabeled, right? And so they've got the same button, just a different little label that they printed with their ancient label printer that like pushes the plastic up off the strip because they don't like new technology. Yeah. I think I've done pretty good for a ramble video. Oh yeah. There was another point that Kizzume made in his little video that I really disagreed with. Like, this is the whole reason I actually decided to turn the camera on today and ramble for what might be an hour by the time I'm through about a 1 minute and 24-second video. Not fair to Kizzume, right? But here's the thing. His criticism of wokeness is that it claims to have... Well, he claims that it's trying to seek to tear down existing systems, right? And it doesn't have any replacements. It has no constructive vision. This is the part that I had a big problem with. Because alternatives to a lot of structures that they are criticizing are always being talked about. Always. Like... So I feel like it's a conservative talking point that is used to get people to not look into what the alternatives that the other side is providing by saying, oh, well, we listen to them and they don't provide any alternatives. So then you don't look, right? But here we go. Let's say instead of racist or unjust legal systems, right? The wokeness, the woke mob would suggest that we use restorative justice models, that we use community policing, civilian oversight boards of police, cash bail reform, diversion programs instead of incarceration, stronger civil rights, and civil rights enforcement, and accountability for police misconduct. One of the biggest things about that police misconduct that I feel like is fucked up with accountability is that every other license in Colorado where I live, like me as a therapist, I have 2 licenses, right? And you can look up if I have any violations on my license. You can see the same for plumbers, for electricians, for acupuncturists of the ear. You can see that for pugilists. And for the referees for pugilists, you know, you can see nurses, doctors, everybody who has a license in the state of Colorado to practice what they do. You can see the violations that they've had, the complaints against their license that have been resolved. Except for fucking police officers. Because there's no fucking accountability there. If every police officer had to be listed alongside all the other professions, and every complaint they ever had would just mount up on their license, you know, we would see, holy shit, you know, and we have this existing database that holds every other job, right? And somehow it would be too much of an undertaking for police to be accountable for all the complaints that they have against them individually, right? But every other job that has a license is accountable that way. Right? Fucking massage therapists. Fucking every fucking job that you have to have a license for. Audiologists, right? The people that put the boop, boop in your ear, and can you still hear it? Boop, boop, and you push the little button. Yeah, that fucker, if he gets a complaint against his license, you get to see it, but not a policeman. No, that shit, we keep it under wraps. Fucking accountability is what we're asking for. On the same fucking database. That's a solution that I'm proposing, along with everything else I just fucking said, right? Solutions. How about getting off of like criminal justice stuff, right? We talk about structural sexism and patriarchy, right? What is, we're gonna like want to tear down the patriarchy, right? And tear down all of the structural sexism in the world. What are we trying to get in its place, right? What are we suggesting we replace it with? I'm going to say pay equity, wage transparency, paid family leave and universal childcare, gender-affirming healthcare access, leadership quotas or targets for women or non-binary individuals in leadership, right? Expanded protections from gender-based violence and harassment. I just gave you a whole bunch of proposed structures that we're going to, tear down and what I want to replace it with, right? Have I said anything that hasn't been said before? Like this is put out there a lot. And to say that wokeness doesn't want to replace what it's trying to tear down with anything. Oh my God. That is so weird for you to say when I'm talking about things that they're not new. I'm not being original here. Okay, how about we're trying to tear down a whitewashed or Eurocentric view of education, right? I do this myself as a PhD candidate, and in my teaching, I have to be culturally responsive when teaching in order to help this effort. So that's one of my proposed things that I like to do, and instead, the new Department of Education that's being stripped down to nothing before Trump wants to just completely close it. They put up the snitch form for bigots who are surprised that we teach about bigotry in America at enddei.ed.gov, right? So they want to snitch on people like me who teach that, we kind of need diversity and equity and inclusion in the world, right? And me being a teacher, if I try to teach that to people, they want to smack it down. Don't even fucking talk about diversity. Bam! Don't talk about white people being bad in history. Bam! Right? So, let's see. I would like to replace the whitewashed history with inclusive history curricula, teaching about colonialism and slavery and redlining, which has been oppressing people historically beyond that point where a lot of people want to say, okay, after this date in history, nothing bad happened to black people in America ever again, right? That shit didn't happen. It continues to this day, and it has a legacy that follows them. So I like to teach about it. Especially in curricula. You know what I want? A critical thinking skills class. to be taught around the middle school level. And I know that a lot of parents don't want that because they don't want their kids coming home and saying, hey, why do we believe in these magical beings as a family? Because I am wanting to criticize everything that I know, so that what I know, I can back up with sound evidence. You know, if you have kids going home and asking their parents about their strange views, parents aren't going to like it. So we don't have critical thinking skills classes in America. The closest you get is like a high school class on philosophy, and they don't teach critical thinking as a important concept in those classes. Maybe a logic class in advanced math, but you gotta get into college before you get to things that a lot of parents who want their kids to have the same religion as them would want kept out of the education that's mandatory for kids. So if you have to have that education by high school, they don't want it in all of that mandatory education. They don't want it in any education, really. They want everyone to be nice little church folk and, turn their critical thinking caps backwards. And I would like, instead of just like whitewashed curriculum, I would like ethnic studies programs, right? That's a proposed structure to replace what we have, right? Eurocentric structures. Anti-racism and implicit bias training in schools. I want kids who go to school to learn that it's not right to hate people because the color of the skin. That's my proposed structure here. And the Eurocentric whitewashed model that conservatives once say, that's racism. Teaching that white people have been racist is itself racist. No, you have to be tolerant of our intolerance. And there's a lot of philosophical answers to that. The problem of being too tolerant of intolerance. Yeah, there's a lot I don't want to get into right now, but how about instead of dictating to the students what they're going to learn, we have student-led equity councils. Instead of saying we're going to tell students whether they can talk about racism or not, as the outside entity, the third party to this conversation, right? The A, B, we're talking about the C, saying, you can't talk about those things in those schools that we're never going to go to because we don't like education. How about we have student-led equity councils where they decide what is right about the education that they want to get when they spend their money or go into their own debt at their universities? How about that? That's my proposed structure to replace the barking about what's being taught in the schools. How about we have the students decide what they would like to learn? And if they choose a path of learning a certain thing, we don't say, oh, you can't learn about that. Fuck book burning. Fuck book burning in all forms. And fuck people who try to get in your way of learning the things that you want to learn. That's my my answer is like people choosing what they want to learn on their own and then learning it. That's my proposed different structure that I would be constructivist with, Kizzume. Let's see. Capitalism. And let's say the traditional corporate capitalism that we have in America. You know that the woke mob are trying to tear down capitalism now, right? What do they want to replace it with, right? All of this shit that I've said so far, everybody else that is on the far left have heard it before from other people, right? And I'm not even just like talking out the mouth of Bernie Sanders or AOC. I'm talking about like even further than that. But I'm saying like nothing that I'm saying is original, and you could have heard it yourself if you had listened. Okay, so replacing shareholder capitalism with stakeholder capitalism, which would be valuing workers. You know how wages have remained stagnant while prices go up. Well, fuck that shit, right? We would value communities. We would value the planet. You know, not just the shareholders. We would institute laws which would make corporations necessarily have to be responsible to the communities that they are in. So we would have ESG frameworks of criticizing these corporations. If you don't know what ESG is, I'm saying environmental, social, and governance. Okay, it's something that if you're too numb to all the different buzzwords when DEI became the buzzword, you didn't hear about ESG because it kind of flew under the radar. But it's basically a grade report of how well a corporation treats these different items. It's just a score sheet, you know, and if they're not doing good, then we bark about it, right? So let's see. Instead of, you know, traditional corporate capitalism that we have now in America, how about worker co-ops? Cooperatives are something that these woke mob people would like to see more of. They shop there, right? And anytime they learn that there's a co-op structure to something, they're more likely to shop there. They shop with their dollar. That no one has not heard of a co-op before, right? How about employee-owned businesses? You know, this under a different moniker of capitalism would be, you know, the workers having the means of production owned by the workers instead of a ruling elite class. But we're just simply putting it as employee-owned businesses. That's what I want. That's what I want to replace this funneling of money to CEOs who have billions upon billions when their workers cannot afford to live. I want to replace that structure with, you know, a more equitable spread of the wealth. Living wage policies. Bernie's been screaming about that shit for so long that we know about the fight for $15 an hour, and we still have a national minimum wage of like $7 something, and he's been fighting for it so long that now $15 an hour isn't enough. Like, the actual needed minimum wage is more than Bernie ever fought for. So it's not new that people have been fighting for living wage. Union protections, right? We want more union protections. You see the decline of unions in America happen right alongside the inequality in America and the wage stagnation with the costs of everything keeping on going up, you know. So bring back unions who can fight for better working conditions and pay for their workers, and you won't have as much wage stagnation. That's what I'm proposing as a replacement structure. Fuck, no, nobody heard about a union before? Is that what you're saying? Like, we want to tear down capitalism, but what's this union thing you're talking about? You know, no, we have a proposed structure to replace what's been going on. This rapacious nature of corporations that do union busting. Reparative economic policies, right? We're talking about reparations, which would be in response to things like redlining and slavery and whatnot. We're talking about targeted investments in poor companies, or sorry, in poor places, poor counties where, like, Trump's stated mission with his tariffs, which is not his real mission, by the way. So Trump's stated mission with his tariffs is bringing back manufacturing into America, right? Go to like the most populous place in America, Los Angeles, and you will see that factory work has not been invested in there. There's no capacity for the manufacturing that Trump wants to bring to America. It would take longer than his term to build that. We're talking about targeted investments in marginalized communities where, that's where you're going to get a lot of your workers, right? People who need a job. We're just building factories and making it easier to build the factories in places where marginalized communities already are. And I'm just saying wherever you find poverty, right? Yeah, I'll target LA where there's a lot of minority people there and a lot of people with different skin color than mine. But I'll also say put it in places where all you had were coal mines and, in Appalachia. Like, go ahead, put targeted investments that will bring people out of poverty. And I'm talking about spending tax dollars to do it too, right? Or giving tax incentives, whatever, but not just trying to squeeze every last drop of blood out of existing infrastructure until it crumbles, right? I'm talking about, roads. Let's build some roads. Let's take some of these people that need a job, make them pave roads. We need that. We need infrastructure. Our bridges are failing. I'm proposing that we use tax money to rebuild the bridges so that we have better commerce. This is my proposed structure to replace what's going on, which is squeeze every last bit of usability out of a bridge until it ends up collapsing with a bunch of people dying. Because it just randomly rusted out and collapsed. That's the different structure that I'm proposing. Motherfucker. Let's see. I actually, when I think of woke, I think of like non-binary people, right? I think of purple hair, lavender hair, blue hair. Yeah. So instead of gender normativity, right? Like me being straight, white, male, being the norm, and binary structures where we only say that there's male and female and nothing else that anybody wants to be recognized as is valid, because we want a binary simple structure to be able to whittle everything down to. Instead of that, I'm going to propose, as an alternative, legal recognition of non-binary and transgender identities. Right? That's what I'm proposing as a different thing than what I'm trying to tear down. Right? Gender-neutral restrooms, gender-neutral forms. Right? That you don't have to get all uppity about whether someone's male or female when it doesn't really fucking matter in that context, right? Inclusive healthcare policies, anti-discrimination laws covering gender identity and gender expression, and just generally respecting the identities that people want to take on. Just a general respecting of people rather than dividing people up as to how can we hate them. Right? I want to tear down the hate part and replace it with love. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't just want to get rid of hate and leave a vacuum. Right? I'm saying, like, let's love people. I'm a people person. I like loving people. I like to hear from people all the time. Right? Fucking love for people on the planet. Like, wow. What do you replace hate with? If not hate, then what? I've never heard of anything that you could replace hate with. Those woke people, they want to get rid of hate but they don't tell us what we want to replace it with. Fuck. It's that DEI that you're trying to demonize. The diversity, the equity, the inclusion. But, like, simplify it and say, love. Replace the hate with love. Okay. Yeah. When woke people are, like, angry about certain structures, and they speak about it, a lot of times like the pundits on Fox News will say that what they're saying is nonsense, and that doesn't happen anymore, and that's in the past. You know, it's 200 to 400 years ago, and so I disagree. I think that we're still living in times when some of the concepts such as colonialism and imperialism are very valid. For instance, now the U.S. is in alignment with Israel and Russia as the only 3 countries on the planet that are trying to take over other countries. You know, we got U.S. trying to get Canada and Greenland. Oh, you know, I don't take it seriously. I don't think it's going to happen, but, you know, they stated things in the news. You just look it up. You know, Israel trying to take over Palestine. Yeah. But here's something. Look at the patches on the side of Israeli soldiers, and you'll realize that in order for that shape of a country to happen around that body of water that's on their patch, they would have to take over the other side of canals and go into Egypt. You would have to take over part of Lebanon. You'd have to take over a lot of other things in order for their manifest destiny of what they think their country looks like, for that to happen, right? They're very expansionist. It's not just about, like, taking away the indigenous people of what we call Palestine, you know, taking away their land and, like, squeezing them out. It's about a little bit more than that, and it's, you know, progressive steps towards that. They've had some of these lands before, but, you know, land wars over the last 100 years. And then you got Russia that took over a bit of Georgia, then took over the Crimean Peninsula, and then trying to take all of Ukraine now. And you know, yeah, you got the only 3 countries that are openly expansionist and want to, like, take over other countries' land in alignment. And one of those countries is the country that Kizzume and I live in, where basically we've admitted that capitalism won't survive unless we have expansionism. You know, if we can't expand to new resources, then capitalism doesn't really work as well. You know, it's not very sustainable. So let's go invade some other things and take over other resources, whether we make them states or not, right? So what I'm proposing as a different structure than the colonialism and imperialism of trying to take other people's lands all the time and then exploiting it for the resources, trashing the planet and all that. What I'm proposing as an alternate structure to colonialism and imperialism, which has been stated before by a lot of people, is decolonized education for our kids. And how about, like, when I just went to The Wiz at the Buell Theater here in Denver, we got a land acknowledgement where like, you just read the flyer and it says, we respect this land is sacred to this tribe, blah, 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 blah. Like, land acknowledgement. So, and say, you know what? We are on land that used to belong to other people that we took, you know, acknowledging that fact. That we broke a whole bunch of treaties and took more land and more land, and then we don't keep any promises, in this colonial imperialistic force that we live in, right? How about we support some indigenous land reclamation efforts and sovereignty efforts, and maybe not transport uranium over the last bit of land that they have left, and spread a whole bunch of radioactive dust everywhere. That's happening just south of my neck of the woods on the Navajo lands. How about, reparations and truth commissions, where we gather all the things about what happened in Tulsa, and we present them as a historical fact that doesn't get denied by half the country that just want to stick their heads in the ground, whenever they hear that, don't say they were racist, we don't want to hear it, and let's talk about this. How about an anti-interventionist foreign policy? Now, this is where far leftist rhetoric looks like it's going back around on the other side of the horseshoe, where we start agreeing with some other people that are on the far right, like Ron Paul and Rand Paul, where we start talking about maybe we shouldn't interfere as much with other people's foreign policy, such as bombing the shit out of brown people for more oil. I don't want to do that anymore. I think the opposite of I'm okay with paying more for eggs because I love Trump is me saying I'm okay with paying a little bit more for natural resources because they're sourced ethically. And I actually vote with my dollars that way anyway. So if I learn that something's sourced ethically. So, wow. What else does wokeness represent? Handicapped people? I just bought a pin that said not all disabilities are visible for some of the things that go on with me. But let's see. Yeah. Ableist systems. So, we're talking about putting a ramp in front of a library where a wheelchair can get up, right? But it's more than that. We're talking about universal design in public spaces and digital infrastructure so that we can have people use things, expanded disability benefits and accommodations. I know that Kizzume, this means something to you when I say that the amount of money that we give to disabled people to live in our country is pathetic, because you can't even rent a room on Airbnb. Well, it's one room out of a house where you'd have to, beg to use the bathroom. You can't even afford one room on what, $900 a month in a lot of the places where disabled people would have to live, where there's public transportation and stuff and access to the resources they need. You can't find a place to live at all. No rentable space for what they make, plus be able to do anything else with the money. So yeah, a one-bedroom flat in Denver is $1,500. So if the max you're going to get for being disabled is $900, you're not living alone, and you might not be living. Maybe the lack of improvement to that is meant to, just forget about handicapped people and maybe hope that they just go away in that horrible way that the streets just take care of the problem. Instead of being all eugenicist like that, I'm proposing we actually help these people in a more inclusive fashion, because fuck eugenicists. let's say, neurodiversity affirming education and employment practices, right? Let's not hate on people for things that they don't have the ability to change about themselves. Healthcare access reform would do a lot for this as well. I'm not the first person to say universal healthcare, and I won't be the last. And it's been talked about all over the world. We're the only country that doesn't have universal healthcare. That's the first world country. That's so yeah. Let's take down the for-profit model of healthcare, where everybody's sicknesses are a source of income for some billionaires, and let's replace that with universal healthcare. That's what I'm proposing. There's a structure. I'm going to take it down, and I have something I want to replace it with, right? And it's woke. You can't tell me it's not woke, right? So yeah, bottom line, like when we strip away wokeness of like caricatures of what wokeness is, and when we take away the idea that they don't have any ideas on that side, and we take away the idea that there's nothing good to be had from other opinions, that diversity of opinions is a good thing. We can see that wokeness generally seeks to replace exclusionary or unjust systems. And when I say replace, I say put into place inclusive, equitable, community-centered alternatives. Right? Like, I'm not just saying tear it down. I'm saying we need, like, generally all of the woke ideas are to add programs, add to what government does, add to what the community should be doing for its people, right? We're not talking about taking away things like and not replacing them with better. We want better, right? The thing that we want to get rid of and not see come back better is hate. We want to replace it with love, but like, yeah. How about democratic accountability? How about historic consciousness, and how about human rights? And getting rid of chaos like we have right now, where we don't even know what the president's going to do week to week. And how about we stop having so much nihilism about that chaos? Instead of just resigning ourselves to, well, this is the way it's got to be because he won, replace that idea with we actually have things that will work. And when that fails, the things that they're trying to do, let's try this other thing. So yeah, every criticized system, right? Everything that Kizzume would say wokeness criticizes, just go ahead, tag me, and say, what would you propose as a structure to replace that? And I will say something that is unoriginal, that needs to be done in its place. And has been said over and over again. So, no, wokeness does not just seek to tear down without putting anything in its place. That's, ugh. Yeah. And that's the end of this ramble. That's the end. How long have I been talking? Oh, damn, a long time. So, a lot more than just what a minute 24 video would need as a response. But I like to ramble,